People say the newer It was scary as fuck, one of the best performances and but I do believe the original one is by far one of the scariest horror movies of all time.
You think so?
Yes, bro. And it's for the simple fact of the intro scene and then also the death scene of George. Bro,
It's scary?
did you ever watch it?
Original one? Unfortunately not.
I'm gonna show you the first beginning scene. They wanted it to seem like a serial killer, not like some sort of evil entity.
Like John Wayne Gacy?
In a way, yeah.
Aren't you going to say hello? All sorts of surprises down here. And balloons, too. All colors.
Do they float?
Oh, yes. They float. Georgie. They float. You float too!
What the fuck? Oh my gosh, bro. Imagine seeing that shit as a jit. That shit would traumatize me.
Not just kids, adults still to this day say that that's one of the scariest movies, bro.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty biased. I still think the other Pennywise is scarier.
Oh, nah, that's low-key a hot take, bro.
You think that's a hot take? Yo.
That's a very, very hot take.
Let me know in the comments, guys.
Decomposing body of 31-year-old Gareth Williams was found inside his London flat under grotesque circumstances. Gareth, who was a brilliant MI6 and GCHQ codebreaker, had been stuffed inside a red North Face duffel bag, which was padlocked from the outside. The bag sat in his bathtub, the air inside quickly suffocating any hope of survival. No fingerprints were found on the lock, the bag, or the bathtub. No signs of forced entry, and no DNA. It was as if whoever did this had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only an eerie silence. Experts tried again and again to replicate the scenario. Multiple attempts by escape artists and forensic specialists failed to replicate it, and no one could lock themselves inside the bag without help. His apartment heater had been left on full blast, accelerating the decomposition, ensuring crucial evidence melted away before his body was ever found. Was he tortured, suffocated, poisoned? Authorities danced around the truth, first suggesting an accident, then admitting he was likely unlawfully killed. But by who? Gareth had been working in the world of deep intelligence, encrypted secrets, and covert operations, and with people who never left loose ends. Had he seen something he shouldn't have and was silenced? If so, whoever did it knew exactly how to make it look like he was never even there. This case remains one of the biggest mysteries in true crime.
This is one of the worst pedophiles in world history. 62-year-old Colin Thackeray from England. Colin was a moderator on dark web chat rooms where he would instruct other pedophiles on how to abuse children and get away with it. On these sick forums, Colin went by the nickname Captain Birdseye, and that's because he, quote, portrayed himself as a sea captain roaming the oceans with a crew of children that he would sexually abuse. Colin lived alone and in squalor, and he reportedly spent 14 hours a day chatting with people online about the abuse of children. When he was eventually arrested, investigators found over 2,000 CP or CSAM images and videos on his devices, with 350 of those files being in Category A, or the most severe. And he not only helped to moderate other CP or CSAM sites on the dark web, he actually created his own with his own images. And disturbingly, other pedophiles online would see his posts and come to him for advice. Advice on how they could abuse children themselves and get away with it. And Colin was happy to share and happy to help out. He provided instructions on how to groom children, how to take images and videos of children, and yes, how to abuse children and get away with it. But disturbingly, at the end of his trial, Colin was only given 17 years in prison. That's right, for playing a part in the victimization of over 2,000 children, and for helping other predators get away with their crimes, he got 17 years in prison. I talk about this all the time. I do not think the laws and consequences surrounding these sorts of crimes are nearly strong enough. But if you want to join me in my journey to expose these people and show governments that this is not enough, check out my podcast. It's also a YouTube channel, The Conspiracy Files, where every single week I cover crimes like these and other injustices and aim to raise awareness around these sorts of crimes so that they can be eventually stopped, or at least until we can get some sort of an upgrade in the punishment for these crimes. Because reading about these things and researching these stories and then finding out that a guy like this gets 17 years in prison is just incredibly disturbing and infuriating.
I guarantee you've never heard of a deadly love triangle case as crazy as this one. What this woman did to get a guy is a whole other level. Dave Krupa was a 35-year-old man from Omaha in Nebraska. He worked as an auto repairman and had been in a very long-term serious relationship with a girl called Amy Flora. Now, the pair had been together for years and years, and they even had 2 children together. He'd recently just come out of that relationship and was kind of adjusting to life being single. He really wasn't interested in a serious relationship right now. In 2012, he met a customer called Carrie Farver. The pair were both very attracted to each other right from the outset and began seeing each other, although he did explain to her that he just really wasn't looking to settle down right now. Now, it seemed like she was on the same page. She told him that she was just looking to have some fun too. Now, Dave, like I said, wasn't into committing right now, so he was dating other women, and one of these women was called Liz Golyar. Now, Liz had some things in common with Dave. She'd also had 2 children, but tragically, one of her children sadly passed away. This was in really horrific circumstances. Her little son, baby Cody, died in 1999 from shaken baby syndrome. Now, Liz was 21 at the time, and her boyfriend was called Glenn Herr. Now, Glenn admitted to police that he occasionally threw the baby in the air to make him laugh, and he was ultimately put in prison for 10 years for killing the child. So obviously that was extremely tragic, and Liz was single again with 1 child, and her ex was in prison. She was lonely and looking for a partner, and like I said, got together with Dave. Again though, he was honest with Liz and said he just wasn't looking for a full-on relationship, and she agreed to this. Soon after Dave and Liz began seeing each other, Liz did show a bit of jealousy. She was jealous that Dave and his baby mum had quite a decent relationship and were co-parenting. So Liz actually did end up convincing Dave to trial a relationship between the pair of them, and I think, to be honest, she ultimately just was grinding him down. She was constantly wanting a relationship and he really wasn't. So reluctantly he accepted to do this kind of trial. However, that's when he started seeing this customer Carrie, and also was still talking to other women online. It wasn't clear the exact timelines, but he was definitely seeing Carrie and Liz at the same time. So one evening when Dave was hanging out with Carrie, Liz kind of had a feeling that another woman was over at Dave's place, and although it wasn't really her place, she did just show up unannounced. The whole thing was very awkward, and the women ended up having this kind of brief encounter together, and it was just super weird. And the way Liz had been acting was kind of pushing Dave away, and he was more interested in Carrie, to be honest. So Carrie ended up spending more and more time at Dave's house, and ended up staying over quite a bit as well, because her workplace was quite close to Dave's apartment. On the 13th of November, the pair parted ways and Carrie headed to work. And shortly after, Dave got a text off Carrie that kind of took him by surprise. Carrie asked if she could move in with him, and he kind of politely declined this and almost thought she was joking. He then got a text off her along the lines of, "Fine, I don't ever want to see you again, go away, I'm dating someone else, I hate you." Carrie's family members also started getting very odd texts. Her mum got a text off her basically saying she was moving to Kansas completely out the blue. Her family really started to worry when Carrie actually missed some really important sort of moments in her family's lives, such as her half-brother's wedding and her dad's funeral. She was reported missing, but was kind of texting people saying, "Stop looking for me, like, leave me alone, I'm an adult and I've gone off on my own accord." And frustratingly, police couldn't get hold of her. Liz told Dave she too had been having some bizarre texts off Carrie. Then Liz told Dave that when she came home one day, she found her garage had been graffitied, which said the W word. Liz and Dave kind of bonded over this abuse that they were getting off Carrie, but on the 17th of August 2013, things got much worse. Liz called Dave in a mad panic. Her house had been set on fire and her pets were deceased. Now this was 2 dogs, a cat and a pet snake. They'd all perished in the fire. Dave then got a text from Carrie admitting it was her who did it. Carrie's mum ended up telling police that Carrie did have bipolar and maybe she'd stopped taking her medication or something, and that would explain all of this bizarre behaviour. Still, no one could find Carrie, and it wasn't until spring 2015 that detectives really amped up their search. Now, Liz went to the police and said to them that the harassment from Carrie had still been ongoing. She actually provided them with a theory. She said that she believed it might actually be Amy, the baby mum, sending her all this abuse. Officers also started to suspect that Carrie might actually be dead. They ended up finding her car, which had suspiciously been wiped down pretty much, but they did find blood stains in the vehicle. This kind of confirmed their theory that Carrie might actually be dead. So police ended up seizing Liz and Dave's phones, and what they found on Liz's phone shocked them. She had photos of Carrie's car and numerous fake email accounts, as well as an app that allowed her to schedule text to be sent at a later time. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Liz called 911 in a panic, saying that Amy had shot her. She said she was injured, her leg had been shot, but she was alive. Now, investigators took this extremely seriously and questioned Amy, but she had a solid alibi. So what on earth was going on here? Police began to get very, very suspicious of Liz. But surely she wouldn't set fire to her own house, kill her own pets, and shoot herself in the leg, would she? It turns out she did, and she did a lot worse. Investigators found a horrific image on an SD card of Liz's that she tried to delete. It was Carrie's dead body. Liz had stabbed her to death all of those years ago and had been posing as her ever since. In 2017, Liz was convicted of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. She was given life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Abby and Zoe were best friends enjoying a quiet evening together. Abby's laughter echoed through the room as she sipped her wine. Zoe's 2-year-old son played on the floor, his tiny hands rummaging through his mother's purse. As Zoe stepped away to use the bathroom, Abby turned her attention to the boy. "What are you playing with, little man?" she asked, smiling. The toddler giggled innocently, his hands fumbling through lipstick and keys until they landed on something cold and metallic. It was a gun. The tiny boy, oblivious to the danger, began waving the handgun around, pointing it at Abby. Her heart sank and panic filled her voice. "Put that down, sweetie. That's not a toy," she pleaded. Her voice trembling, but he didn't understand. And then, the single shot echoed through the house. Abby's lifeless body slumped to the floor, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Blood covered the entire floor. Hearing the shot, Zoe sprinted back into the room. The sight before her was a nightmare, her best friend motionless in a growing pool of blood. Her son still playing with the gun as though nothing had happened. With shaking hands, Zoe snatched the gun from her son, tears streaming down her face. She called 911, choking on her words as she explained the unthinkable tragedy. The authorities arrived, but nothing could undo what had just been done. One innocent moment of a child's curiosity had turned into an unimaginable tragedy.
I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but there is no Epstein list. There's no official list or document that's going to say, oh, Bill Clinton was a pedophile and did this and this, or Donald Trump's a pedophile and did this and that. So this entire thing is just incredibly offensive. It's offensive not only to the survivors of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, but also to every American, because it treats you and I as really fucking stupid. This is a complete distraction tactic and a smokescreen to make you believe that they're being truthful about Epstein when they will never be truthful about Epstein. There are way too many prominent people, both Republican, Democrat, Independent, that all stand to lose something if those actual documents were to be released. The real list that we should be asking for is the Operation Flicker list. Tweet your representatives and tweet people that you know in the government, because what I'm about to share with you is insane. I put a video out about Operation Flicker a day ago on my YouTube channel, The Conspiracy Files. But basically, almost 2 decades ago, the US government discovered that there were 5,000 people working in the federal government who had downloaded CP materials, either using their work emails, using their work devices, or in some way connected to their work. And for some reason, less than 20 of those people were ever prosecuted. Only a handful, less than a dozen, were convicted of crimes against children. The US government let the other 5,000 pedophiles go. And they're more than likely still working in the United States government today. If you want to watch that full video, here's my channel. But this whole thing is just a big fucking joke and a smokescreen.
Back in the day, there was this show called Life with Grandpa, which was basically this Christian puppet show. It was meant for toddlers and children, and the characters in this show were humanoid-looking puppets. Grandpa, which was basically like the main host of the show, he was kind of made to seem like someone that you look up to. And then you have his wife, 3 children, Techi, Davida, and then you had Davidito.
Life with Grandpa, what can be more fun? Living where there's love for everyone.
It seems innocent right now.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. God bless you. Here we are once again. Let's all say hello to the children that are watching.
Hello. I love you. Hello.
Praise the Lord. That's a lot of love.
Before the show was even aired, there was this story called Life of Grandpa. It talks about one of the kids questioning why they have different skin colors even though they're related. And Grandpa starts telling them that your mom golfed other men and conceived you guys.
Is this showing us scene?
Yeah, so it
What
tells
the
them.
fuck? And this is all supposed to be for kids?
The author of this and the creator of the show was a cult leader. He was a religious cult leader. The show, Life with Grandpa, is based around him and his family. And he basically believed that kids should be involved with their parents and adults' lives. I'm not going to talk about all the graphic stuff.
He was a pedophile,
Yes,
basically.
bro, yes.
They literally look like the characters on the show, bro.
Davidito, his real name was Ricky Rodriguez, and he endured the most abuse out of everybody since he was David's first son.
Murder victim seemingly came back from the dead 22 years later. This case is full of so many twists and turns that I never saw coming. Mary Day was born in New York in February 1968. She had 2 younger sisters, and unfortunately they didn't have a very stable upbringing. Their mum Charlotte would often neglect them all, and they had been in and out of foster care. The mum ended up divorcing her first husband, which was the girl's dad, and then got married to a man called William Hewell. In a really cruel turn of events, Mary and her other sister were separated from their sister Sherry. Now, Sherry was left behind in foster care, while Mary and her other sister were reunited with Charlotte and the family. Charlotte then had another baby and the family moved to Georgia. Then she had another child who she called William Jr. So we now kind of have this new family. We have Mary and her mum and her stepdad, her original sister, just one of her original sisters, and these 2 new step-siblings. Unfortunately, Mary's dad Charles was then killed in an accident, her biological dad. So Mary was not only struggling with the grief of losing her biological dad, but something really sinister was going on in her family home. Mary was being abused by her stepdad William. Now again, Child Protective Services did have to intervene, and in 1980 Mary was once again removed and placed in foster care. I mean, how many times can this child be sort of moved in and out and taken off her family, put back in the family home? It feels like clearly there's an issue there, so maybe she should just be removed for good. Yet again, very frustratingly, after a short amount of time, Mary was placed back with her family. But bizarrely, on around the 15th of July 1981, Mary vanished into thin air. Her parents didn't report her missing, which is just so bizarre, and it seemed like local people didn't even know that she had ever existed. The parents just carried on their lives as normal with the other siblings, with no concern for where Mary was. Now, years and years went by, and still the parents never reported Mary missing. That was until Mary's sister that I mentioned, that Sherry, wanted to be reunited. In the meantime, like I said, she'd been kind of off in foster care, and then she'd been officially adopted by another family. She obviously really missed her original siblings though, and just wanted to reunite with them and reconnect with them like I think anyone would. In 1992, Sherry got back in touch with her biological mum, Charlotte. We know Charlotte's pretty problematic. She's had a lot of kids taken off her, given back to her, taken off her. She also never reported her child missing. So when Sherry reconnected with her biological mum, the mum just told her, yeah, your sister Mary ran away. Now Sherry was obviously horrified at the thought that her little sister had run away about 10 years ago and just nobody had heard from her since. She straight away went to file a missing persons report, but frustratingly, due to the time that had elapsed, police just weren't interested. It was left to Sherry to do most of the legwork. It would take years of Sherry really trying to spread the word about her missing sibling and get age progression photos, etc., for an investigation to finally be launched. Now we're skipping right over to 2002 now, so loads of time has gone by. Officers started to look back at old files of like school records and things to see whether there was any clues there as to what had happened, but Mary wasn't even enrolled in school when she vanished. Kathy, Mary's sister, told Sherry all about the night that Mary went missing. Now, this really did help to shed some light on the situation. She said that they'd both stayed inside the home, her and Mary, while the others went out for food. And when they got back, William's dog seemed to be really unwell, and William accused Mary of poisoning the dog. Now, William then attacked Mary, apparently so badly she was bleeding from her face, and that's the last time her sister saw her. Following day, she'd obviously just vanished. Now, Charlotte disturbingly burned all photos of Mary and pretended she never even existed. To be honest, hearing this, Sherry pretty much thought, okay, they murdered her. She was literally 13 years old when she vanished, and although, yeah, maybe she did run away and start a new life, it seemed very unrealistic. Charlotte had even made very weird statements about how she could hide a body and it never be found. Now, it was around this time that police did feel like they did have a murder investigation on their hands. They began interviewing the parents, and they found out that they'd been financially benefiting from Mary's dad's death. They'd been claiming benefits that were intended for Mary from her late father. They were also found to have lied about loads of details to officers. William even apparently admitted that it was possible that the night that Mary vanished, the devil inside of him may have taken over and killed her. Kathy told officers that there was an area of the back garden she'd been warned never to go to. When they brought in cadaver dogs, they seemed to indicate that there was the smell of death in that area, although no body was found. Then there was a twist that I never saw coming. In November 2003, a truck was pulled over. It had stolen license plates. Officers spoke to the occupants of the vehicle and took their IDs, etc. to examine. Lo and behold, one female passenger inside the vehicle had identification stating that her name was Mary Day. All of the details on the ID were the exact same as missing Mary. They obviously interviewed her straight away, and she said she had been that Mary Day who vanished and she'd run away to escape abuse. Did they finally have Mary back? Now, something was off. Mary's accent was very different, which of course could have been because she'd lived elsewhere for so long, but her ID had also only just been issued. This person actually just assumed Mary's identity as a fake because of the news of the homicide investigation. There was only one thing for it: they needed to do a DNA test. And shockingly, results came back that she was a biological child of Charlotte. The investigation was closed, and it was concluded that the new Mary was the original Mary. But the strange goings-on didn't end there. Now, Kathy and Sherry, the sisters, really doubted that she was Mary. Mary was really reluctant to speak of the past and explain what had gone on, and also seemed to not remember key events. Mary also started to behave very strangely. Some even wondered if she had a personality disorder. Then she sent an email claiming that she wasn't who she said she was. She really struggled with alcohol and even attempted self-unaliving and became violent. This caused huge issues between her and her sisters, and eventually she moved away. She sadly passed away in 2017 of cancer, and nobody even arranged a funeral for her. Let me know what you think. Was this real Mary, or was she an imposter?
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
I don't think so. No, 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 no. I don't think so. No, 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 no. It's never, ever, 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 ever gonna happen. I don't think so.
This movie called From Hell basically is based around Jack the Ripper, who was like a known, world famous serial killer back in London, and he was like the original mass murderer back then, and he was known for like his ways of cutting people like a doctor would.
How would he leave the bodies? What would he do to them?
He would take body parts from them, like organs, especially from the female anatomy. He killed mostly prostitutes, and the thing is, like, he was never caught.
Still to this day,
no one knows.
Wait, I feel like there was no way of capturing him, bro. Especially back in the day where prostitutes were looked down upon, and they're not gonna go to the cops because their shit is illegal. And on top of that, they didn't have the technology that they have now, like for example DNA or fingerprints or shit.
Yeah. Wait, so is there an actual picture of Jack the Ripper, or
no? They don't know who he is, bro.
Last month, a teenager live-streamed a terrorist attack. It was the 12th of August 2024 in a city in Turkey. An 18-year-old male, only referred to as RDK, walked near to the Tepebasi Mosque. He was wearing a skeleton mask covering his face and a helmet. He was also armed with knives as well as an axe. He was wearing a stab-proof vest as he approached the area. He actually had offensive symbols printed onto this vest. He stabbed at least 5 people in the garden of a cafe next to the place of worship. His victims were mostly elderly men who'd been at the mosque to pray. He live-streamed on the app X, which is formerly known as Twitter. He used a camera that he had strapped to his chest in order to do this. Horrified viewers watched as he approached and then attacked civilians. He was eventually thankfully wrestled to the ground and arrested. By some miracle, it's reported that all of the victims have actually survived.
The allegations of Ansel Elgort sexually assaulting a minor are pretty disturbing if they're true. Let's cover them. So if you don't know Ansel, he's an A-list Hollywood actor. He was in a number of movies like the Divergent series, The Fault in Our Stars, and a film that I love, Baby Driver. Now, I remember back when I was in high school, Ansel was a heartthrob and girls really loved him. But that would all change when some disturbing allegations came out in 2020. So on June 19th, 2020, a Twitter user named Gabby came forward with some pretty disturbing allegations about Ansel. Allegedly, according to Gabby, they had connected online, they had met up in person, Ansel had sexually assaulted her, and the entire time he knew that she was a minor, being 17 at the time that they had relations. Now, Gabby wrote a very long and thorough breakdown on exactly what happened. If you want to read it, it's still on Twitter. But it's really disturbing if all of this is true. Ansel was much older than Gabby. Obviously, this whole thing was illegal because she was a minor, and he even wanted to allegedly have relations with her also underage friend. In the wake of all of this, there were other people who came forward and claimed that Ansel had come onto them when they were minors as well. And as proof, the Twitter user named Gabby, who really fired off these first accusations, came forward and posted a screenshot showing Ansel giving her his private Snapchat information. I don't know what to think about all of this. Obviously, Ansel denied that any of this happened in the first place. He posted a pretty thorough response, but yeah, no legal ramifications ever came out of this whole ordeal. But Hollywood really hasn't seen anything from Ansel Elgort since then.
What the Matrix is based off on, I don't know if it was a philosopher telling this story. Basically, it's based off of this story where 3 guys are locked inside a cave. They're chained down like this. There's a light shining behind them, right? The only thing they can see is a wall with the shadows. And every day somebody comes and like little things, they like put shadows. And they think it's the most beautiful thing in the world. But they don't really see what the makes the shadows. They only think that what exists is the shadow.
These guys never turned their head to see that there was...
They can't. They're chained to
Oh.
only see one wall, but they don't think nothing else exists but shadow.
That's because they never seen the sun.
They don't know anything else. Yes,
The mind, man. It's a powerful thing.
And then one of them breaks free. They turn around and they're like what the fuck? So that's what makes the shadows. So what the fuck is there more than what the fuck this wall was?
It's more than meets the eye.
Yes, exactly.
In 2015, 68-year-old Dennis Antiporic left a note for his family saying he was going to the saunas in the community condominiums, which he used a lot to treat his chronic medical conditions. Once in there, he cranked up the heat and sat down to relax. This is where things went wrong. The timer inside the sauna was broken and the heating coil was malfunctioning, causing the temperature to rise extremely quickly to unsafe levels. Because of this temperature, Dennis collapsed and was unable to escape the sauna. After a few hours, his family realized that Dennis still hasn't returned. So his daughter Laura went down to the sauna to check on her father. Upon entering the sauna, she mistook her father for a dark-skinned man, so she exited the sauna. She then found her father's clothes on the counter and realized the dark-skinned man was actually her father. Help was called, but it was too late. Dennis passed away from asphyxiation, and his skin was broiled as if it was jerky. His daughter was even quoted saying his face felt worse than a dried piece of beef jerky.
This doctor in Kansas was recently charged with an incredibly disturbing crime. Meet Brian Albers. Brian is a pediatric neurologist in Kansas City, Missouri. Before his arrest, this is where he worked, at the Overland Park Medical Center. In doing some research for this TikTok, I saw a number of photos of Brian working closely with children. It's pretty disturbing to see him in these circumstances, given what I'm about to tell you. Well, on November 15th, 2023, Brian was charged in federal court on CP or CSAM charges. Allegedly, Brian had been recording children with hidden cameras. The police also discovered text messages that Brian had sent that read, "I'm going to jail. I'm going to lose my license. I do not want to die. I do not want my kids to see me dead." According to the person who actually reported this crime, they were asked by Brian themselves to head to the hospital to retrieve his electronics. Brian then asked the person to destroy these electronics because they contained, quote, bad stuff. Upon searching these devices, the authorities discovered something disturbing. They discovered over 1,006 explicit videos. Brian had been recording videos of his young patients using hidden cameras from December of 2020 all the way up until October of 2023. And yeah, you heard me say that right. He had over 1,000 videos on his devices. I think that makes these news reports that are still online that feature Brian interacting with children all the more disturbing. So Brian was taken into custody on November 16th, and the FBI is now actively asking people to provide any information they have about him. And I don't think the future looks too bright for Brian.
In 2005, this man would terrorize an entire community in Maine, and he's never been caught. In the sleepy town of Cape Elizabeth, this man, who became known as the Cape Intruder, began breaking into people's homes just to watch them sleep. The Cape Intruder would only break into homes where doors and windows were left unlocked, and he would never take anything or harm anybody, but he would just stand over the victims and watch them sleep. Some people would wake up to him standing over them, but he would always disappear before they could act. He left the entire town terrified and paranoid to go to sleep. It got to the point that there were so many break-ins that the community set up neighborhood watches to try and catch the man doing this. Victims came forward and worked with police to create this composite sketch. But the break-ins eventually stopped and the man was never caught. And to this day, the Cape Intruder is still out there.
Talking about the incident that happened with Tiffany Haddish.
I'm seeing that shit surface and circle around. And I think all of this started because Arias Spears was talking shit about Lizzo and clowning her and making jokes. And obviously somebody on the net done seen some video from back in the day and decided for them to resurface that or bring it back up. Is a video called The Mind of a... Okay. Something that automatically off rip would just make you feel like, why would you do it? And it's two people who are literally, at that time, were on the way up in the industry, but did have names. They thought making a skit using two young siblings, use them in ways that they shouldn't be used in a video. Not to the extent of what you may think, but like sitting in the tub with the kid.
Like a grown-ass person.
Yes. Or looking at him through cut-eye holes in the newspaper while he's playing with his toys. Just weird, bro. I only seen one video that involved Arias Spears, and Tiffany Haddish was in it for like 2 seconds, but she left. He's being left at home with this person who has the mind of, yeah, someone who thinks that it's cool to like younger children or even them and all that stuff. It gets uploaded on a website called Funny or Die. Bro, Tiffany Haddish said that the kids were being used for a Nickelodeon commercial. That's how she got them.
This girl and her stepdad vanished from their home. The secrets police will uncover will make you physically sick. Sydney Randall was 14 years old from Arkansas. On the evening of the 9th of March 2013, her mum Denise noticed Sydney was missing. She also noticed her husband John was also missing, who was obviously Sydney's stepdad. Now Denise was incredibly worried, but she was momentarily relieved when John arrived back home shortly after. However, he wasn't with Sydney. Denise told him of her concerns and how worried she was for Sydney's safety, and he told her not to worry, he was off to file a missing persons report at the police station. However, time went on with no news, and John failed to return home. Denise decided there was nothing left for her to do but to make the police report herself, this time for John and Sydney. A huge search began for the pair. That was until days later when John's body was found. He was found at the side of the road by a field with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Our police thought this was incredibly suspicious given the circumstances. John was deemed by them to be likely involved in Sydney's disappearance. After initially being completely flabbergasted by this, Denise eventually agreed that that was likely. Search teams were still out in force to try and find the missing teenage girl, but no luck. Weeks and then months rolled by until eventually, May 2013, a body was discovered. Sydney was tragically found deceased in the Black River near the Lawrence and Randolph county lines. A medical examiner confirmed that she died from blunt force trauma. DNA was found underneath her fingernails and was sent to be tested. Eventually it came back as a positive for her stepdad, John. Now, Denise was understandably devastated by this news. She believed that Sydney and John just had a normal stepdad and stepdaughter relationship, but she couldn't have been more wrong. Sydney's dad then came forward with some more horrific news. He stated that he had suspected that John was SAing his daughter. Sydney's friends would also later confirm that she had told them she was scared of him. It's believed that John likely killed his stepdaughter to keep her from telling anyone about the abuse.
This woman survived one of the most brutal and disturbing attacks ever, and this is a massive trigger warning. On December 18th, 1994, Alison Botha was abducted near her home in South Africa. By the end of the night, she had been stabbed, raped, and disemboweled, but somehow she managed to live. After an ordinary night out with her friends, Alison Botha drove back to her apartment in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. But as soon as the 27-year-old parked her car, a man with a knife forced his way inside. The attacker ordered Alison to move onto a different seat, trapping her inside of her own vehicle. He then drove her car to pick up an accomplice, and it was immediately clear that the two men had sinister plans for her. Frans du Toit and Theuns Kruger told Alison Botha that they were going to have sex with her. They asked if she would fight them, and clearly trapped and terrified for her life, she said no. The two men, who had history of violence against women, both raped her, and they then soon determined to kill her as well. At first they tried to suffocate her, but even though she lost consciousness, she clung on to life. Frustrated, Frans and Kruger took their brutality to the next level. They stabbed Alison at least 30 times in the abdomen, who later recalled that Frans specifically wanted to mutilate her reproductive organs, but somehow the attackers missed those specific parts of her body. When Alison's legs twitched, Frans and Kruger decided the job wasn't quite done yet. They then slit her throat 16 times. Apparently satisfied that they had killed her, Frans and Kruger drove away, saying nobody could survive this. But little did they know, Alison was still breathing, and in the distance she could see headlights streaking through the bushes. When Alison moved towards the headlights, she realized the full extent of her injuries. As she pulled herself up, her head started to fall backwards since she had nearly been decapitated. Meanwhile, she could feel something slimy protruding from her abdomen. It was her intestines. She had to use one hand to keep her organs from spilling out, and the other hand to literally hold her own head on her body. There, she collapsed along the white line. Even in her disoriented state, she knew that this was the only and best position to attract the attention of the motorist. Fortunately, Alison didn't have to wait long. A young veterinarian student named Tian Ellard, who was visiting Port Elizabeth on vacation, saw Alison lying in the middle of the road and stopped. He used his veterinary training to tuck Alison's exposed thyroid back into her body. Then he called emergency services for help. Alison Botha was then rushed to the hospital where doctors were stunned by her horrific wounds. One doctor even said that he'd never seen such severe injuries in his 16 years of practicing medicine. Alison was on the brink of death, but she managed to pull through, and she also remembered everything about her attackers. She was soon able to identify them from police pictures while she was still in the hospital. This led to the speedy arrest of the Ripper Rapists, as they were called in the press. This case is just absolutely crazy, and can you imagine getting almost beheaded and disemboweled and surviving? I give Alison so much respect because most people would have just given up and died. But she managed to survive despite being brutally attacked and injured. This is definitely one of the craziest cases, and thank God Alison survived.
The Cecil Hotel is one of the scariest places that I've ever stepped foot in. So to get into the hotel, we went earlier in August. We had to do some things to get in there, stuff that I'm not going to mention or be too graphic with, but we made our way in. And I should mention here that the security guard at the front told us that he doesn't go upstairs in the hotel unless he's got a group of 2 other people with him. Yeah, the security guard says he only goes up in pairs or threes. And he also was asking us, like, you guys have a knife, right? And we're like, no. So hearing that from the security guard was a little freaky. But one of the residents who gave us an impromptu tour of some of the floors was telling us some really disturbing, shocking things. She said that since she moved in 2 years ago, there have been somewhere between 15 to 30 deaths inside of the Cecil Hotel. She mentioned that some of those deaths were overdoses. Some of those deaths were people ending their own lives. And I was just shocked by how many residents that we spoke with who lived in the hotel, who had paranormal experiences living there. Like this one woman who was speaking with us said that her and her boyfriend heard a little girl singing in the hallway, and when they opened the door, they saw this little girl, looked at her, they both saw her, and then she just vanished into thin air. And another woman told us that she sees this French man standing by the elevator all the time, gazing off. He's got a briefcase and glasses on. She thinks she gets the vibe that this was someone who took their own life. But I'm releasing that documentary on my YouTube channel tonight, The Paranormal File. It's the first time, to my knowledge, people have brought cameras into the Cecil in a while to show what it's like nowadays. And it's funny to me because you go and you look on YouTube and you can see this clip of the Los Angeles government or city council, whoever it is, when they reopened the Cecil as affordable housing. And the halls were pristine. They were talking about how they're going to really crack down on this place and they're going to do their best to provide so much. They're going to, put their best foot forward and help out those individuals that are being placed in the hotel. And when you're in there, it's not like that. There is a major lack of management there. I talked to a police officer for my video who told me about how many phone calls they get a day. 2, he said, a day from the Cecil. There is violence. There were women that were telling me about sexual assaults that happen in there. People telling us about gangs that control floors that will stab you if you hear the wrong thing. It's truly like a place I have never been in my life. And in my video, I compare the Cecil Hotel in my mind to a character in its own horror story, almost like the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. Because seriously, if you examine all of these incidents, all the strings of people that took their own lives in the Cecil, the people who were murdered in the Cecil, the bizarre deaths, just all the crazy violent stuff that is not death related. I'm talking about attempts to end people's lives that are never, talked about. I'm talking about overdoses, of which there are probably thousands in the building. And yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable in there. It seems like the Cecil itself is this entity, and not a good one. It's really like a vortex of energy, and it was crazy. So if you want to see all that footage that we captured, it's going to be on my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files, this evening. And yeah, just know that everything you've read about the Cecil, everything you've seen about the Cecil, the documentaries you've seen about the Cecil, it may seem negative to you and it may seem a little spooky, but I can confidently tell you, as somebody that travels to places like this all the time, I've just recently on this trip, I've been to 11 different haunted, abandoned conspiracy locations in England. That place is pure evil, and there is something in there that I cannot put my finger on, that I don't know if it's compelling people to do terrible things, or it's influencing people's emotions, or what it is, but it's really like the hotel is alive. And if you watch the footage, you will see proof of that. Anyways, just felt like I would share that because, yeah, it was crazy.
There's nothing more twisted and disturbing than Japanese-style/inspired horror films, so I already know that when this comes out next year, it's gonna be terrifying. The movie's called Something Followed Me Home, and it's loosely based on an evil Japanese spirit called the Onryo. The Onryo is a malicious spirit who can inflict harm on the living, and it's described as being one of the most brutal and deranged spirits, basically killing anything it can as a way of revenge for what happened to it when it was alive. The movie follows Nova, an optimistic woman who one night is followed home by an evil entity. The entity digs itself into her skin and environment, so throughout the film, you'll always feel its presence lurking nearby. Then Nova begins receiving strange phone calls from her missing sister, and the rest of the film is her trying to survive a night of terror, which by the looks of it is going to be hard, as the entity's MO is violently placing plastic bags over its victims' heads while paralyzing them with fear. Something Followed Me Home is a feature film that's expected to be released early next year. The inspiration for this film is top tier. It'll have elements of Ringu, Pulse, The Grudge, and one of my personal favorites, It Follows. The director is Simeon Gregory, who is a multi-award-winning filmmaker based out of Yakima, Washington, which is my hometown, so this holds a special place in my heart. This is set to begin filming at the end of September, and Simeon could use our help to raise some funds to make this film as creepy as possible, like exactly as he's envisioned in his head. So if you'd like to donate, you can do so by going to his website, which is in my bio, and there you can see some of his goals and what you can get by donating a certain amount. The campaign for this ends on September 15th, so if you can, let's see how much we can raise to help this filmmaker out. He released one of my favorite horror shorts 2 years ago called Death Death in a Box. It's about a girl who finds a mysterious box, and when she convinces her friend to open it, sinister events unfold. And it's seriously so creepy that I wish it was a full movie. So if you want to watch that and kind of see what his work is like, it's free on Tubi. I can't wait to see how this holds up and how disturbing it's really going to be.
This is said to be one of the worst cartel videos ever, so whatever you do, don't look up the video. Before I begin, I can't stress enough how bad this video is. Whatever you do, never go searching for it. The full version of the video is 6 minutes long, and the video is shot in the nighttime in some sort of desert location. You see the victim, who has been blindfolded with his hands tied behind his back, and he is also wearing a white t-shirt that spells out the cartel he belongs to. The scene seems to be lit up by the car lights, and the victim is surrounded by multiple heavily armed cartel members. They are wearing all black tactical gear and carrying high-grade weapons. One of the cartel members then begins to read a statement, and as he's doing this, the cameraman starts to move closer to the victim. After the statement is finished, the victim is forced to the ground face down in the dirt. Multiple cartel members hold him down by stepping on his back and pulling back his arms. The victim has been completely immobilized so they can carry out this awful act of violence. The victim doesn't make a sound as he awaits what's about to happen to him. After the victim has been restrained and pinned down, a cartel member carrying some kind of large knife slices a vertical cut on the back of the victim's head. He does this as a starting point to flay and scalp the victim as he is still alive. After the cut, blood starts to puddle on the dirt floor, and using the initial cut, the cartel member slices under the victim's scalp and starts to remove it from the skull. As he cuts, he pulls the skin back to ease the blade cutting underneath the scalp. After a few seconds, the back of the victim's head has been completely scalped. However, the cartel member makes sure not to cut the skin off in chunks and instead attempts to complete the scalping and flaying in one clean go. After the skin on the back of the victim's head has been severed, the cartel member then moves to removing the skin and hair from the sides of the victim's head. While doing this, he also cuts off the victim's ears. The back of the victim's skull looks like a red ball with shades of white from the victim's skull also showing. The top of the victim's head is then scalped. The victim is still alive, but somehow has yet to make a sound. Not even one scream. The victim is then turned over on his back, and as this is happening, a cartel member puts his boot on his chest to stop him from moving, and at this point, the victim, who is still conscious, says his first words, and despite the awful and intense pain he must have been going through, he tells the cartel member to simply stop stepping on his chest in a very calm manner. But as he's lying on his back, a cartel member then flays the skin off of his face. He pulls the skin that has already been flayed and starts to cut down from the victim's forehead. And as the blade slices under the skin, you hear a tearing type sound, which is just awful. After about 20 seconds, the cartel member completes the flaying, but he realizes he missed a few pieces of skin on the victim's cheek. He then goes back and cuts the remaining skin off. The victim also has his nose cut off, and what is left of the victim is a horrific sight. His head looks like a red skull, and due to the lack of skin, it makes his teeth and eyes way more prominent. The detached scalp and face is then placed on the victim's chest, and the cartel member then finishes off the victim by cutting deep into his throat, and it appears to finally kill the victim. The cartel member then cuts off his tongue and takes off his shirt. He then plunges the knife deep into the victim's chest and cuts vertically, exposing all of his organs. The victim at this point has lost so much blood that it doesn't even cause bleeding. The cartel member then reaches into the victim's chest and cuts out his heart. The heart is still beating, and he then holds it up to the camera. The cartel member then kneels down next to the deceased victim as the camera focuses on the still beating heart. The last 2 minutes of the video is the cartel member still holding the beating heart in complete silence. Nobody talks, and all you hear is the wind blowing until the heart stops beating and the video concludes. Whatever you do, please don't go searching for this video. Just when you think you've seen it all, a video like this surfaces. I can't stress enough how bad this video actually is. It's just crazy knowing that this is happening in real time to real people, and it's just awful knowing that stuff like this happens on a daily basis.
This case will make you terrified to go back to school. This is the haunting case of the back to school killer. On the 17th of October 2009, students in Fairfax, Virginia were really excited to go and see their favourite band in concert, Metallica. 20-year-old Morgan Harrington was one of them. Morgan and her friends all went to the concert together, but during one of the opening band's performances at around 8 p.m, she left to go to the toilet. When she failed to return, her friends got really worried. They managed to ring Morgan, who told them that she'd accidentally ended up outside of the venue and security wouldn't let her back in. She reassured her friends that she would probably just try and get a lift home, and the concert went on. After the show, it was clear that nobody knew where Morgan was or could get hold of her, so they reported her missing. Police started hunting for her, and then they made a terrifying discovery. Her mobile phone was found in a nearby car park and the battery had been removed. This was obviously a huge red flag. Witnesses reported seeing Morgan that evening by a nearby taxi rank looking quite drunk. The band Metallica even helped out and did a video appeal for help from the public. Another worrying discovery was made in November when people found Morgan's t-shirt in bushes near the campus. The case seemed to grind to a halt until January 2010, when a local farmer tragically found Morgan's body on some of his land. The police at this point were also testing the DNA on Morgan's t-shirt. This showed that the DNA from an unknown person on the t-shirt was a match to somebody who had attacked somebody in Fairfax in 2005. However, police still didn't know who that person was, and Morgan's case went cold. That was until another hideous crime. In the early hours of September the 13th, 2014, 18-year-old Hannah Graham was lost in Charlottesville. She was a sophomore at the University of Virginia. She texted her friend to try and get some help after getting lost after attending an off-campus party. Similar to Morgan's case, when Hannah failed to turn up to class, she was reported missing. Luckily, Hannah was captured by quite a lot of CCTV. Horrifyingly though, in one of the pieces of footage, you can clearly see a man start to follow her. He was a very tall man with either braids or dreadlocks. Women around the same area that evening also reported seeing this man acting inappropriately with women. Earlier in the evening, he'd been asked to leave a bar because of this, and then the women noticed that this same man had his arm around the girl that we now know is Hannah. These girls decided to follow the pair as they just had a gut feeling that something was wrong. They actually tried to intervene and tell the man to back off from the drunk student, but he was quite intimidating. He actually ended up taking Hannah to another bar and buying her drinks. Later, other witnesses said that they saw Hannah buy an orange car, apparently telling the driver that she was not going to get in the car. That was the last time she was seen alive. Police managed to identify the driver of the car and the man, obviously, who was following the student as 32-year-old Jesse Matthew Jr. Infuriatingly, over an 11-month period, he had actually been investigated for allegations of art at multiple universities. He was never prosecuted, and he was actually able to just simply leave those universities after each incident. Now, interestingly, Jesse actually drove a taxi. If you remember back to Morgan's case, she had disappeared while at a taxi rank. After being interviewed by police, Jesse frustratingly managed to get away. He sped out of the police station and escaped. He was plastered all over the news, and luckily a woman at a beach in Texas spotted him. She ended up calling police to report this, but they really didn't take her seriously at first, and she ended up having to call several times. After she literally had to beg them to show up, Jesse was eventually arrested. Police were able to link him to the attack in Fairfax in 2005 and also to Morgan's murder. A month later, Hannah's body was found just 5 miles from where Morgan was found. He was eventually sentenced to 3 life terms for the attack in 2005 and then given 4 life terms for the murders of Hannah and Morgan. In 2019, interestingly, he was actually diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and I can't seem to find an update as to whether he's still alive. Please take this case as a warning to be extra vigilant and always stay with your friends on nights out. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to do this, but obviously women are vulnerable, so please do keep a lookout for anyone looking vulnerable and walking on their own.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
My 2-year-old son accidentally shot me with a gun while I was pregnant. My name is Laura Ilg, and I was 31 years old and married. I was doing laundry when my 2-year-old son went into my husband's and my bedroom. Normally, this room was always locked, but not this time. That's when he managed to find my husband's gun, which we had for extreme emergencies, but we never thought it would be used, let alone in this way. As I was picking up the laundry, I had my back turned to my son, when suddenly he accidentally shot me in the back while I was 8 months pregnant. I managed to call for help, and I was transported to the hospital. Unfortunately, I passed away a few minutes later due to my son's actions and my own carelessness. The baby I had been carrying for 8 months also did not survive, as the doctors couldn't save it. Unfortunately, my husband's gun took my life while he was absent. So, after hearing my story, are you in favor of or against guns in the United States? I'm looking forward to your opinion in the comments.
Teenage cheerleader has been found murdered in her bath. Lisbeth Medina was a 16-year-old girl living in Texas. She studied at Edna High School, and her mum had actually recently moved to the area from Nebraska just the year prior. She was recently absent from a Christmas parade she was due to attend on the 5th of December. She'd actually planned to attend with her whole cheer squad, so it was very unusual that she didn't show up. Her mum decided to go and see where she was, and what she found was every parent's worst nightmare. Shockingly, she found her daughter in her pajamas, deceased in the bath. Due to her being found in her pajamas, authorities think this may mean she was killed before school on the day in question. Police believe that she is a victim of capital murder and have arrested a 23-year-old man. This is 23-year-old Rafael Romero. They have not yet released the girl's cause of death. Her auntie has launched a fundraising page for her family, and she states, "Any support that you can offer to my family at this time, anything is appreciated."
These are pictures with the most disturbing backstories, part 4. Okay, here we have this picture. And the man shown here is just a chef cooking some food. But a little while later, he tosses his head into the fryer, completely deep frying his entire head with oil and dying. And the most messed up part about this is that there's a video of it. Apparently the man was possessed by some sort of ghost or demon, or he had some sort of mental illness, which was even noticed by some of his co-workers. But in the video, the man rotates his head extremely weirdly and inhumane, and just throws his head into the deep fryer with no hesitation, leading people to believe that he was possessed. Because why else would any sane person just throw their head into deep frying oil? I don't recommend anybody watching or searching up the video because it is pretty disturbing. Mainly because it just comes out of nowhere. 1 minute the chef is just cooking food doing his job, and the next he starts twisting his head all weirdly and throws his head into the deep frying oil. I will probably never watch it again, and you should never.
I caught a brain-eating amoeba while swimming in an abandoned pool. My name is Caleb Zilgelbauer, and I was a 14-year-old in 2022 when my family decided to make the most of the summer by exploring local fairs and looking for a seaside house to enjoy our vacation. We found a house with a pool that wasn't in great condition, but the heat made us overlook this detail. We planned to explore nearby beaches and continue enjoying local attractions. However, we had no idea of the nightmare that awaited us. 5 days into our trip, I was plagued by fever, searing headaches, and even hallucinations. The next fragment of memory I managed to retrieve is waking up in a hospital, confused and terrified. Doctors quickly identified the cause of my torment. A brain-eating amoeba, a creature literally feasting on my mind while I innocently enjoyed my vacation. To make the situation even darker, this infection has a staggering mortality rate of 99%. My family was devastated, and I had only a 1% chance of survival. Doctors gave me no more than 4 days to live, but I survived.
So this happened on Sunday. A man has been charged with aggravated assault and other charges after police alleged that he intentionally crashed his car into a Pennsylvania home. This resulted in the vehicle being lodged in the home's roof and the second story. At around 3:15 p.m. on the 6th of August, an incident occurred in Mifflin County, Pennsylvania. A 20-year-old called Evan Miller allegedly drove his vehicle into this home on purpose. Police stated in a news release that they believed that this was an intentional act. Joan Lepley, whose house was the one in question, says that she was with her cousins when they all heard a commotion. Joan heard her relatives shout to her, "There's a man on your roof and there's a car on your roof." The vehicle is thought to have collided with the embankment outside of the house, causing the car to propel upwards into the roof. Thankfully, because of where the car hit on the roof of the house, nobody was injured. If it had hit the ground floor of the house, it could have been a very different outcome. The driver has been charged with multiple charges, including aggravated assault, recklessly endangering another person, and obviously careless driving. After a man disappeared under mysterious circumstances, a random person browsing on Google Earth accidentally solved the mystery. William Maltz was 40 years old when he vanished. He disappeared from Lantana in Florida on the 8th of November 1997. Now, he wasn't particularly drunk when he left to go home, and he called his girlfriend at 9:30 p.m. to say he was nearly home. The police launched a missing persons investigation when he failed to return home that night. However, there were very few leads and the case soon went cold. It would be an agonizing 22 years before there was any news of what happened to him. It wasn't until the 28th of August 2019 that a member of the public was browsing on Google Earth and noticed something strange. It was the manager of the Grand Isles housing development near Palm Beach who was looking at the area via the satellite images on the website. They noticed something in a pond that looked like a submerged car. Police were notified and sent officers to investigate. The car was removed from the water and had clearly been under there for an extended period of time. It had completely rusted, and inside, as you may have guessed, were human remains. The medical examiner confirmed that the remains were William. The area had been a building site at the